It was supposed to be an ordinary Friday, the kind of slow, agonizingly dull day where students counted the minutes until freedom. Seventh period calculus was the only thing standing between me and a much-needed spring break, and I could feel the restless energy in the room. My teacher, a notoriously relaxed guy, seemed to sense the collective impatience. Instead of drowning us in equations, he pulled up sporkle.com and had us play a brand logo quiz. The entire class was engaged, laughing, enjoying one of those rare moments where school actually felt fun. That's when it happened. The moment was so mundane yet so defining that it burned itself into my memory. My friend had just answered a question. Adidas. I remember it vividly because at that exact second the school intercom crackled to life. The dean's voice, usually calm and measured, came through, but this time it was frantic, shaky. "Teachers, this is not a drill. Initiate lockdown, now." A cold chill ran down my spine. The room, once filled with laughter and chatter, went dead silent. My teacher, always laid back, turned ghostly pale. Without a word, he bolted to the door, switched off the lights, and motioned for us to move to the farthest corner of the classroom. We obeyed without question. Minutes crawled by like hours. The school's usual background hum, the faint buzz of the intercom panel, the murmur of distant voices had vanished. It was as if the entire building was holding its breath. Then came the screaming. A man's voice, raw and frenzied, echoed down the hallway. At first it was distant, like something out of a nightmare, then closer, louder, unhinged. He was bellowing incoherent threats, his voice laced with a fury that made my blood turn to ice. Two girls huddled beside me began crying softly, their muffled sobs barely audible over the approaching chaos. Then came the crashing, the sound of fists slamming against metal lockers, a rhythmic, violent pounding. "I'll kill all of you!" The words were primal, animalistic, and worse. Getting closer, I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to breathe through the suffocating fear. My teacher pressed a finger to his lips, urging us to stay silent. The classroom door rattled as the handle twisted violently. The intruder had reached us. A girl couldn't hold it in. She screamed, a short, sharp cry of pure terror, and the pounding on the door became relentless. Fists, kicks, a force so intense I thought the door would give in. "Open up!" he roared like a beast denied its prey. I clenched my hands into fists, nails digging into my palms, too scared to move, to blink, to breathe. The room felt impossibly small, shrinking with each brutal bang against the door. And then, silence. The pounding ceased, the screams faded. Footsteps shuffled away down the hall, still ranting, still unhinged, but leaving. I didn't dare move. No one did. 10 minutes passed, though it felt like an eternity. Then, the intercom crackled back on. The dean's voice returned, still rattled but clearer now. "The intruder is no longer in the building. Remain in lockdown until further notice." Relief flooded the room, but no one spoke. No one moved from their spot. Later we learned the truth. A mentally unstable man had wandered in through the front doors that, at the time, had no real security. He had attacked the receptionist and stormed into the halls. Nobody knew if he was armed, which made the situation all the more terrifying. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. A janitor working the late shift found the man later that night, curled up inside a storage closet. And this time, rumors swirled, whispers among students, half-truths traded in hushed voices. They said the janitor had seen something in the man's pocket, something metallic, a gun. The police were called, but by the time they arrived, the closet was empty. No one ever found him. Even now I wonder, where is he? What was he planning? And most of all, did he ever really leave? It was early October, a time when the leaves began to shift into warm shades of red and gold, and the crisp autumn air carried a slight chill. The morning had started with a steady drizzle, and by lunchtime, the overcast sky had darkened, hinting at a possible storm. My school had two separate lunch periods. The first was for all 6th graders and some 7th graders, while the second was reserved for the rest of the 7th graders and all 8th graders. It was during the first lunch period that the entire school was thrown into chaos. I was sitting with my friends at our usual spot near the windows in the cafeteria, idly chatting about an upcoming test. The sound of rain tapping against the glass filled the background as students shuffled in and out, grabbing their lunches. Then, out of nowhere, it happened. A sudden sharp noise cut through the air. Boom! I flinched, my tray rattling slightly. My first instinct was to assume it was thunder. It was a stormy day after all. But before I could say anything, Another loud bang followed, then another. 4 in total. The cafeteria erupted into a chorus of startled screams, chairs scraping against the tile floor as students scrambled to make sense of what was happening. At first, some of us thought it might be a prank, kids stomping or slamming tables, but then the campus security stormed in, their voices urgent and authoritative. "Everyone inside now. This is a lockdown." Panic set in immediately. Kids in line were forced to throw away their lunches and rush toward the multi-purpose room, which doubled as an auditorium. The staff worked quickly, herding students inside and closing the doors behind us. The room was massive, with a back wall made of floor-to-ceiling glass windows that overlooked the field. My friends and I barely had time to process what was happening before we noticed staff members rushing to cover the windows with thick black curtains. They worked quickly, making sure no one outside could see in, and stationed themselves near every exit. A nervous energy filled the room, whispering voices blending with the heavy rainfall outside. I turned to my friend Eric, whose face was set in a deep frown. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice hushed. He shook his head. "I don't know, but this isn't normal." He got up and moved toward one of the adults stationed near the door, exchanging a few quiet words before quickly returning. His expression was grim. "You know those houses right in front of the school?" he whispered. I nodded slowly, already feeling a pit forming in my stomach. "There's some guy barricaded inside one of them. Apparently, he's threatening to..." He hesitated. "He's threatening to kill himself, and anyone who tries to stop him." I stared at him, not sure I had heard correctly. "What?" Eric exhaled sharply. "Not only that, he was seen walking near the school, watching the students, in a really weird way." A shudder ran through me. The idea of someone unstable lurking so close to the school watching us made my skin crawl. The next hour passed in tense silence. We weren't allowed to use our phones, and every time someone whispered too loudly, a teacher would shush them. I sat there, feeling the weight of the situation press down on me. The occasional distant siren from outside only made my anxiety worse. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we were given the all clear. Security personnel escorted us back to our classrooms one by one, making sure no one strayed from the group. That night, I learned more details. The man lived right next to my friend Brandy. She told me something that made my blood run cold. "You remember last Halloween?" she asked. I nodded. "Well, I saw him that night, in his window." I frowned. "So?" She hesitated before lowering her voice. "He was cutting his arm and writing something on the glass with his blood." I felt my stomach turn. "What did it say?" Her voice barely came out as she whispered, "Don't come here or I'll kill you." I stared at her, my mind struggling to process what she had just said. Back then, we had all assumed it was just some creepy Halloween decoration, some twisted joke. But after what had happened that day, we realized the truth. It wasn't a joke, and we had been lucky, incredibly lucky. From that day on, I never walked home alone again. Fresh out of college and eager to start my career, I landed a job at my old high school as a computer technician. It wasn't the most glamorous position, but the pay was decent, and I had a soft spot for the place where I spent my formative years. The school basement where my office was located was a mess. Dusty wires, old computers, and broken monitors cluttered the space, but hidden among the chaos was a surprisingly cozy office. It had 3 large desks, 2 mini fridges, a flat-screen TV mounted on the wall, and best of all, an air conditioner, a luxury the students and teachers upstairs didn't have. My 2 co-workers, Dave and Gary, were older guys who had been with the school's IT department for years. They were usually in and out of the office, handling tech issues around the school. That day, they were upstairs dealing with server maintenance, leaving me alone in the basement. I had just unwrapped my sandwich and was midway through my first bite when my office phone rang. "This is the main office," a woman's voice said. "The school is on lockdown. Stay where you are. Do not attempt to leave until further notice." I froze mid-chew. A lockdown? Lockdowns weren't entirely uncommon. Sometimes they happened as a precaution. Maybe an unrelated crime was occurring nearby, or someone had reported a suspicious person on campus. But something about the woman's voice made my stomach twist. It was tight, anxious. "Is it a drill?" I asked. "No." A slight pause. "It's not." The call disconnected. I swallowed hard and set my sandwich down. My first instinct was to turn off the lights. Even though my office had no actual door, just a wide opening, it felt safer in the dark. The basement itself had a door, but it didn't even have a functioning lock. I pulled out my phone and texted Gary and Dave. Me. "What's going on? You guys good?" No response. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Still nothing. The silence in the basement was unsettling. Normally, the hum of computers and the occasional distant footsteps from upstairs provided a sense of normalcy. But now, nothing. It was like the entire school had gone still. Then the basement door creaked open. The sound echoed through the space, sharp and jarring. I sat up straight, my pulse quickening. Footsteps. Not just regular, casual footsteps. These were hurried, unsteady. Someone was coming down the stairs fast. I hesitated, debating whether to call out. Was it Dave or Gary? Or maybe an administrator checking the basement? But something stopped me. An instinct. I quickly slid off my chair and crawled under my desk, pressing my back against the cool wall. The footsteps grew louder, then slowed as they reached the basement floor. Someone had entered the room. I held my breath. They didn't turn on the light. The air felt thick, suffocating. Whoever it was, they weren't moving like they knew where they were going. They were pausing, listening. Then, ding! A text notification. My heart dropped. I fumbled to silence my phone, but the damage was done. The footsteps shifted. They were coming closer. Panic took over. My muscles tensed as I prepared to bolt, but before I could move, a voice cut through the darkness. "Hey!" I jumped, barely suppressing a yelp. A man stood in the opening of my office. I couldn't make out his face in the dim light, but I could see his silhouette. Tall, broad-shouldered. "It's okay," he said. "I'm hiding too." Something about his tone felt off, too casual, too rehearsed. "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was here to pick up my son," he said. "A teacher told me to hide." His voice was smooth, but there was something lurking beneath it, something calculated. Then my phone vibrated again. I glanced down. "Dave. Dude, this is insane. Some guy shot Mr. Buckley. Red shirt, black hat. Whatever you do, stay put." My breath hitched. Slowly, I looked up. The man was wearing a red shirt and a black hat. I felt his eyes on me, watching my reaction. My mind screamed at me to stay calm, but my body was already in survival mode. I moved before he could react, lunging out from under the desk and sprinting toward the stairs. Bang! A gunshot. The sound ricocheted off the metal servers, echoing in the confined space. Pain shot through my leg, not from the bullet. I hadn't been hit, but from the way I slammed into the stairs in my blind panic. I scrambled upward, gasping, every nerve in my body on fire. As I reached the top, the basement door burst open. Police. They tackled the man before he could make it past the last step. I collapsed against the wall, my entire body trembling as officers swarmed the area, shouting commands. Later, I found out the truth. The man had personal issues with Mr. Buckley, something about a grudge that had festered over the years, but no one could understand why he had taken it this far. Mr. Buckley survived. The shooter didn't. And me? I never set foot in that basement alone again, but sometimes, late at night.